wherever you love, we welcome you.
Good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us on this virtual broadcast here at First Unitarian Church of Toledo. While we're apart, it's really nice to see you all virtually on YouTube. If you'd like, as we see these orders of service come through, in your FYI, there are always downloadable links. Remember to go through and see what events are being available for y'all on the weekly social, church life, or administrative. If you'd like the FYI link, please comment below or get in touch with someone at the church, and we'll make sure you have that resource. And now, some opening words.
Good morning. Welcome to our Unitarian Universalist congregation. I'm T.K. Barger, and I'm the senior minister of this growing, journeying community. We welcome all of you to our live streamed service, especially those of you who are searching for a spiritual home. Many of us were once too, and maybe still are, seeking for something larger than ourselves to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do that well here, but not perfectly. And when conditions are better for us to be together, possibly when it's rarer for people to be infected by COVID-19, and almost certainly when there is a vaccine readily available, we'll once again meet regularly in person. But for now, we come together by YouTube, on Zoom, and over our Facebook group, as well as in other responsible ways. In this congregation, we strive for perfection, but not for perfection, but for authenticity and for connection. Whether it's your first time here with us or your 100th time, that's with the congregation. We've only done 20, maybe 30 by now, live stream services, many more than we ever expected. We hope that you'll find here questions that stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious values that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically.
Our chalice lighting will have words by Sandra Fees. We light this chalice to honor our past, for the founders and prophets of Unitarian Universalism who paved the way for our liberal religion in the world, and also for the individuals who gave birth to our religious community here. We light this chalice to honor our present, for our search for truth and meaning, our nurture of diverse spiritual paths, and our service to the cause of love and justice, acknowledged our sacred responsibility to live our principles with integrity. We light this chalice to honor our future for a kinder and fairer world, for a people and a planet made whole by the Spirit of life.
For a moment, that chalice just would not light. Please join me in reciting our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now we have congregational singing. Please sing at home if you feel called to. And if you're just with your own family, it's fine if the dogs and cats howl and mew, whether it's with the song or in protest of any singing. But the noise will be good. This is number 1014 from our teal hymnal, titled Answering the Call of Love. Some of you might know it as Standing on the Side of Love. The author, Jason Shelton, changed the title and some of the lyrics in terms of being more inclusive in an equal access way, realizing that many people cannot stand. So this is answering the call of love.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Now it's story time. This is a story written by Daniel Harper, a Unitarian Universalist minister of religious education. We're using this copyrighted story with his permission. Once upon a time, in a vast and prosperous kingdom, there was a beautiful city spread out between the rolling hills to the east and a big bay that led westward to the wide, wide ocean. In this city, there lived a family in a tiny little house on a quiet side street, a mile or so from the bay. There were two parents and three children, and while they never had much money, their house was filled with love. Now, one day, the oldest child went to his parents and said, "It is time for me to leave home. I am old enough to go out on my own." His parents were sad to see him leave, but they knew he had grown up and it was time for him to leave. "Go out and lead a good life," they said to him. So the oldest child went out into the world. He found a good job that paid very well, and he made lots and lots and lots of money. After a year and a day, he went out and bought a very expensive car, put on his most expensive suit of clothes, strapped on his solid gold wristwatch, and went home to visit his parents and his younger sister and brother. When the oldest child arrived back home, his parents welcomed him with open arms. He pointed to his new car out the window. It's a Whizzer XZ7000, he said proudly. That's nice, dear, they told him. And look, he said, I'm wearing an Italian suit made by Karma Karmali. That's a nice, dear, they told him. And look at my watch, he said, pulling down his sleeve to show them. Solid gold. How about that? That's nice, dear, they told him. Is that all you have to say? He said. Aren't you proud of me for making lots and lots and lots of money? Of course, we're proud of you, dear, his parents told him. But having expensive things isn't really that important. Not too long after this, the middle child came to her parents and said, it is time for me to leave home. I am old enough to go out on my own. Her parents were sad to see her leave, but knew it was time and they bid her goodbye. The middle child went out into the world and got a good job, but instead of spending all her money, she saved as much of it as she could. After a year and a day, she gathered together all her stock certificates and mutual fund reports and went home to visit her parents and her younger brother. When she arrived back home, her parents welcomed her with open arms. She spread her stock certificates and mutual fund reports on the old dining room table. Look how much I have, she said proudly. I live very simply and spend almost none of the money I make. That's nice, dear, one of her parents said to her. And the other parent said, but why have you saved all this money? The middle child stammered and stuttered and finally said, I hadn't really thought about that. There's more to money than just having it, they said. Not too long after this, the youngest child came to his parents and said, it is time for me to leave home. I am old enough to go out on my own. His parents were sad to see him leave, but they knew it was time for him to leave. The youngest child went out and found a job that didn't pay much, but it was a job where he did lots to help other people lead better lives. He lived as cheaply as possible and put aside lots of money. And he also gave lots of his money away. He gave lots of money to charity so his money would help other people. And whenever he met a homeless person on the street, he always gave them money too. He gave lots of money to his church because he drew strength from his church. And he knew his church depended on the people in the church for all the money they needed. After a year and a day, he went home to visit his parents. His parents welcomed him with open arms. He told them about his job and how much his job helped people lead better lives. That's nice, dear, they told him. And I try to save as much money as possible, he said. That's nice, dear, they told him. But then I give away 10% of my income to my church and lots of money to help other people, he said. That's nice, dear, they told him. Is that all you have to say? He said. I have a good job that helps other people. I have enough money to put food on the table and a roof over my head. And I give away money to my church and elsewhere to make the world a better place. Aren't you proud of me? Of course, we're proud that you have a good job and that you save lots of money and that you give lots of money away, said one of his parents. Yes, said the other. The money and the job are just ways you have of showing your love. Suddenly, the youngest child understood his parents a little better. They would accept him and love him no matter what. The money wasn't important. The job wasn't important. What was important was loving and accepting other people.
Our anthem today is actually another piece from our teal hymnal. It's one we don't often get to do. In my quiet sorrow, when we think about the way we use music in service, it's important to remember to make space to feel and honor the sadness. that might be experienced, especially in 2020. I am worn, I am tired in my quiet sorrow. Hopelessness will not let me be. Help me. I won't speak of this ache inside light eludes me in the silence of my heart. I'm praying. I keep on day by day, trusting light will guide me. Will you be with me through this time, holding me? You're my hope when I fear, holding on, believing. Deep inside, I pray I'm strong. Blessed be.
Now, please join me for a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. In our congregation, we're thinking of Don Parsons, a longtime member of the congregation who fairly recently was diagnosed with cancer. And she was briefly in hospice, then in a nursing home, and she died this week. Plans for a memorial are in the works, but they have not been completed yet. Uh, One thought at present is that our certified lay leader emeritus, Bob Rudolph, uh, might be able to lead a memorial service at the Old West End Commons, perhaps in the spring. We're hoping that uh, times of uh, disease will have eased a bit by then so that we could have a service of that type. But as I say, plans are still in progress, and we'll try to let you know once things do come into a better picture for us to remember Dawn in a formal and sacred way. This is also National Coming Out Day, a day of celebration for many people, a surprise to some, perhaps to parents, uh, but it really is a time when many people announce to the world how much they know themselves better and they want the world to know and accept. And in Unitarian Universalism, we really do embrace people of uh, many different ways of living, and we are uh, a welcoming congregation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people. And we celebrate National Coming Out Day. And if the coming out includes possibilities of marriage, This is a church where marriage can happen between people who love each other. One other thing for this week is tomorrow is what some call Indigenous Peoples Day. Others still call it Columbus Day, but it's a day to think of the land we live on. I know that David Strickler said a little bit about this last week with our land acknowledgement, but uh, many people have stood on the land of the United States of America, and there were many ways to reach it and call it home. Some of it violent, some of it peaceful, some of it by finding the land and settling it, others by moving others off the land. And that is the complicated factor of Indigenous Peoples Day. That now we try to remember the Indigenous people who were on this continent before Europeans came over. And one other element to mention is today is the 94th birthday of Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist teacher from Vietnam who built a movement, and part of that movement is the Flowing Waters Sangha in Toledo. Many of the members of our congregation are also part of Flowing Waters. And next week, we will have a service to celebrate Thich Nhat Hanh. Some of you might have seen some Facebook posts recently expressing uh, much concern that he is not eating and that people were journeying to be by his side right now. The his group has issued a clarification saying that people were rushing to be by his side to celebrate his 94th birthday, and that being 94, he has good days and bad days, and he doesn't have much appetite, but he has not declared that he has stopped eating for good. So we're going to celebrate Thich Nhat Hanh uh, because he is important to the world and, of course, to people in this congregation. Our words of meditation today are by Sarah Sutherland Dean, titled, My Heart Fights for Those Who Can't Fight. Someone called me a bleeding heart liberal. It was not intended as a compliment. However, I will always consider it one of the biggest compliments of my life. My heart bleeds for the underdog. My heart fights for those who can't fight. My heart rejoices in seeing others overcome adversity. My heart desires love and peace for everyone. My heart is compassionate and empathetic. My heart sees pain in others and wants to help. My heart believes in equality. My heart sees the good in people. My heart chooses action over fear. As we continue meditating, let's observe 1 minute of silence. giving life the shape of justice. Roots only close, we're set free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Today's reading is a letter by artist and illustrator Trungles titled Dear Liberal Allies. Dear Liberal Allies, you and I learned very different things in very different ways. If you didn't live an experience, then step aside. We students of color, gay students, trans students, children of immigrants and refugees knew this stuff before our professors told us what to call it. We learned it from the bottom up. You learned it another way. You received a set of keywords and a list of definitions. Your learning was, in all likelihood, here is this word. This is what this word means. For you, it was xenophobia, a strong fear or dislike of people in other countries. For us, it was xenophobia, the time that the boy in my kindergarten class spat on me because I couldn't speak English yet. Or when I saw that clerk yell at my mom in the grocery store because her English wasn't clear enough. For you, it was racism, unfair treatment of people who belong to another race, violent behavior towards them. For us, it was racism. That one time I saw that manager tell that sales girl to follow my dad around at Kohl's. Or that one time my neighbor's kid got shot by the police and they tried to cover it up by convincing everyone that he was in a gang because he was Hmong. But we knew he wasn't. Or the time my dad told me I shouldn't rollerblade to the library because I'm not white and it's not safe for me. For you, it was homophobia, a strong dislike or fear of homosexual people. For us, it was homophobia, that time in the 6th grade when Ryan shoved me against a glass door and banged my face in it while yelling slurs at me until the teacher stopped him. Or when my Catholic high school's president told me that though he loved me as a child of God, he still believed I was sinful. For you, it was classism, prejudice or discrimination based on social class. For us, it was classism, the time when my best friend came over to hang out and her parents didn't want her to come over again because they didn't like our neighborhood. Or that one time when my friends had no idea what food stamps looked like and I was too embarrassed to explain what they were. So while you were learning that these academically framed phenomena were real problems, we were getting figurative name tags for awful things that we already knew. Your weekly vocabulary list was, to us, just a hollow shadow of our lived experiences. When you step out of class, you get to say, "Oh, awesome. I'm learning about how to be a good ally and a better human being. This will help me." For us, it's more like, so that's what they're calling it nowadays. When exactly did they say change was going to come for us?
We begin with the trivium and the quadrivium. Parker Palmer, who could be described as a teacher grounded in liberal Quakerism, in his 2011 book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, The Courage to Create a Politics Worthy of the Human Spirit, wrote, long before modern science became education's dominant paradigm, there was the medieval curriculum called the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. These programs are the immediate ancestors of our liberal arts. so named because they offer the knowledge necessary to live as free, Latin liber, men or women. Knowledge of this sort, Parker Palmer says, is liberating not only because it steeps us in the wisdom of the past, it also accustoms us to ambiguity and paradox, preparing us to find our way into an unpredictable future. And I turn to my favorite reference source, Wikipedia, for an update to today's liberal arts usage. Liberal arts generally covers three areas: sciences, arts, and humanities. Its central academic disciplines include philosophy, logic, linguistics, literature, history, political science, sociology, and psychology. I'm such a proponent of the liberal arts that for my first college degree at a liberal arts college, my major was the humanities area with an emphasis in philosophy. Parker Palmer wrote that a liberal education, which emerges from the heart of the humanistic tradition, emphasized the ability to look at an issue from all sides, to be comfortable with contradictions and ambiguities, and to honor paradox in thought, speech, and action. Humanism, he added, helps us let the tension of opposites open us to new insight. He also stated, a liberal education helps us embrace diverse ideas without becoming paralyzed in thought or action. It teaches us how to claim our own voices in the midst of the clamorous crowd, staying engaged with the communal conversation of a democracy in ways that keep opening us to larger versions of truth. But education is not the only aspect of what it means to be liberal. More common these days, I think, when the term liberal is used, it applies to politics, supposedly the opposite of conservative. But that's not so either in politics and position. However, I must insert here, if you are a political liberal and do have a vote, make sure this election to participate in the democratic process. I won't tell you how to vote, left wing, right wing, or elsewhere, but do vote according to your conscience. Left, the political shorthand, with conservative being right, isn't even accurate enough to describe being liberal. For in the introduction to her book, Moral Clarity, a guide for grown-up idealists from 2008, philosopher Susan Neiman described her commitment to a political position by stating, I like the word progressive, but too many people who use it undercut the idea of progress. The very word liberal has become insipid as well as confusing. What is characterized as slightly left of center in the US is nothing but the commitment to free markets in the rest of the world. After comparing the alternatives, I've chosen to keep the word left, where when all's said and done, the heart beats, as one old saying goes. What else left will mean in the 21st century is still to be defined. Susan Neiman, a lefty, won't claim liberal. A reference book I turned to in preparation to speak about what it means to be liberal is the Dictionary of the History of Ideas, published in 1973. Its entry on liberalism is 25 pages long. So I could be very detailed and actually give a 3-hour sermon. But I know that you have other things to do and won't stay on YouTube that long. So I'll note the larger areas of freedom that it covers, because those are how we can see that liberal is more than politics, more than broad education, and more even than the liberal religion of Unitarian Universalism. For this section, ideas and arguments about freedom since the Reformation. Hold on a minute. Here we go. I lost my place. Here we go. For the section on ideas and arguments about freedom since the Reformation, discussed our religious freedom, that there are human rights and government by consent, that people are essentially social beings, and that not only conservatism is largely counter to liberalism, but so is radicalism, as that quotation from Susan Neiman makes clear. The differences aren't intricately intertwined, one area neatly hemmed to the next. There might be an ideal, an image of what we think should be, but the thread has raveled as we humans put stress and wear and tear on everything, thought, word, and deed included. So rather than a tapestry, aren't we instead kind of a patchwork quilt? You can say that there are religious liberals, political liberals, educational liberals, social liberals, as distinguished from socialists, which would take us back to the political area and again get us talking about how there's a further left than liberalism. And in those different types of liberalism, they're not all inclusive. Yes, you can be a Unitarian Universalist immersed in liberal religion, and at the same time, you can be politically conservative or a radical when it comes to government. And venturing to a Unitarian Universalist church could be the only social aspect in which you engage. I am speaking to a liberal religious congregation living in an area that certainly has its share of political conservatives, many of us people whose education isn't the elite sounding well rounded, but instead geared to the specific work they do, and certainly of value, worth, and dignity. And also today, unfortunately, we're living in a time when social has to mean more of a distant aspect than human nature desires. What it means to be a liberal in many ways is to live with paradox, isn't it? We don't have a rule book or an instruction manual, and the ones we make are never all encompassing, and you probably end up rejecting even those as not specifically for yourself. In the preface to The Life of Choice, Some Liberal Religious Perspectives on Morality from 1978, a collection of essays that includes pieces by Unitarian Universalist scholars and ministers, editor Clark Kuckeman wrote, "Within the tradition of liberal religion, an individual cannot discover the norms by which he or she should live and act simply by consulting the tradition and its established doctrines. Liberal religion is to be identified precisely by its refusal to accept tradition, including its own, as authoritative and binding. Instead, liberal religion's tradition is to question all tradition, and its established doctrines consist not so much of substantive beliefs as of a critical method of inquiry. Hence, an individual in the liberal religious tradition faces an additional task. He or she not only must relate basic moral norms to the concrete circumstances of life, but must also decide on and justify the basic norms of morality themselves. We humans are complex, aren't we? We don't fit well with labels, and our liberal outlook often means we might do a bit more, whether reasoning or work, to be true to ourselves. Let's come to our geographical home with my quoting three former ministers of First Unitarian Church of Toledo for some of their words on what it means to be liberal. Arthur W. Olson, in the transcript of a radio broadcast in his book, Unitarian Beliefs, A Few Thoughts to Help the Reader Understand Religious Liberalism from 1949, stated in the language of the time, using the male gender to include all people, we who call ourselves Unitarians have what we call a way of life. That way of life includes what we call the free mind principle. By that principle, we mean that every individual is urged to think for himself, to build his own philosophy of life upon the foundation of his own individual background of experience. Irving R. Murray, in a 1952 booklet titled A Religion of Their Own, Aims and Techniques of the Liberal Church and Church School, put it this way. The liberals' position is positive, affirmative. We do not believe less, we believe more. Our central affirmation that there is a reasonably established good and our essential conviction that human life has the capacity to attain this good are not a whittling away of ancient truth and nothing more. True, the tree is pruned, but the tree remains itself, faithful to its origins in the only way possible, by living and growing into the future. Liberalism is not scornful of tradition. Neither do we celebrate the dead branches blown down by the winds of history. The living tree is the focus of our attention. Of course, it must grow, and in growing, become different. Unless with its neighbors, it becomes a freak, a petrified forest. Most of the conventional formulations of religion, Irving Murray added, belong to this order of nature, the petrified forest, fossilized remains. And another of my ministerial predecessors, whose name I love, Wendelin Waldemar Wieland Argo, known more familiarly as Wally, in a sermon titled What Liberal Religion Means to Me, based in part on his 1954 book, The Case for Liberal Religion, said, to know, to feel, and to do. This is the formula by which the religious liberal tries to live. And this, in 7 words, is what liberal religion means to me. First of all, it is a philosophy of life, a way of looking at life, that the universe that enables me to feel at home here on our little star, to stand up proudly, secure, and unafraid, to understand that there is a kind of pattern and direction to this audacious human experiment, and that I am important to that pattern and have a place in it. Secondly, liberal religion to me is emotion. It is something I feel as well as understand. It is a force within me that takes hold of the bare bones of my ideas and ideals and breathes into them the pulsating, vitalizing breath of life. Contrary to any popular belief, liberal religion, for me at least, is intense feeling, is spirit in harmonious balance with mind, is the soul singing because it must. And finally, liberal religion is action. It is a way of life, a cooperative quest, a process by which man's ancient dream of a kingdom of heaven on earth is transmuted into living reality. So, from the Dictionary of the History of Ideas, we get that what it means to be liberal is to recognize the freedom of people, that they come to their own understanding of a religion in which they can be true to themselves and it's hoped to help save the world. And that they believe others should be as free as themselves, kind of a golden rule aspect, and that we try to have a government, should I call that a social organizer, that centers on the freedoms of individual and community. That foundationally, we are people of community, and in our individual, intimate, and communal relations, we respect others and we respect choice. And that, though not middlers allowing just about any expression beside us, we are not extreme, as in entirely separated from the mainstream, however life's river flows. Maybe we try to send the current in the way it can irrigate what will grow into the most good. Individually, like Parker Palmer, we hope to be comfortable with contradictions and ambiguities and to honor paradox in thought, speech, and action. And I emphasize, it's not reading about it, though reading is very important, but you must also live it through your own experience and through the tellings of others. There is difference of experience, and it's not all you, not all me. What it means to be liberal, finally, I say, is truly and honestly being yourself, individually and living in community, while doing the lifelong work of trying to understand through reasoning via text, people, and thought, from experience, and yes, even by making mistakes, big and little, trying to understand what makes you, you, and also not keeping to yourself, but in whatever small way, helping to build the world in which you, those you love, and even those who differ from you make this a planet on which everybody can thrive in mind, in heart, in community, at home, and at peace. So be it.
We've now reached the offertory portion of our service. We'd like to remind everyone who's currently a member to have submitted their pledge form. Now is the time. So I would also like to take this time to invite you to take a moment and reflect on the gifts you have received from this community. Your involvement is critical to sustaining this church. We ask that you consider what has been given to you and what you can give in gratitude each week, through the year, and how you can help your community achieve its vision of growth, visibility, and relevance. We invite you to go to uutoledo.org. You can click on Give. Even if you're not currently a member, you can just put a little something in the virtual plate to say hello. And also, if you would like to send a paper form of financial gift, you can do that on our Glendale address, 3205 Glendale Avenue.
And now, coming soon for next week, our 10 a.m. Spiritual Adventures Forum is on the Vision Kitchen from Vision Ministries. And the guest by Zoom will be Pastor Earl Harris of Vision Ministries. Then our 11 o'clock service, as I said earlier, is on Thich Nhat Hanh. And join us for a time of celebration and some concentration on Buddhism as well.
Reminder again to join us for our virtual coffee hour after service each week. We take some time to say hello to one another online. If you haven't visited before, please join us. Visitors are warmly welcomed.
Our closing words are by Mark Bellatini. for religion to be significant. For religion to be significant, it has to provide more than the comforts of community. It also has to provide opportunities for deepening, for what I call spiritual growth, and for the casting down of false images and stereotypes, which hurt us all. A good religion has to open us to the real diversity of our modern world. For our work as liberal religious people is not to be competitive with others and to find ways to supersede others, but rather to find ways to supersede ourselves, to grow beyond our limitations and our constrictive boundaries, each and every one of us. Diversity, you see, must not end up being some sort of feel-good slogan, a word we keep in our back pocket to make us feel like we're broad-minded. Diversity is a gift, but it cannot be a gift unless it is received. It is only received when there are hands and hearts open enough to receive it. And the opening of fists into welcoming hands and welcoming hearts is our spiritual work.
As we send the flame, we hear these adapted words by Steve Stock on inherent worth and dignity. We send our chalice flame into the world to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to reaffirm the historic pledge of liberal religion to seek that justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share that love which is ultimately beyond even our cherished reason, that love which unites us.